What up, y'all? I'm Dr. CBS here with Dr. Jared Ball, and you are tuned into episode 7 of The Last Dope Intellectual. All right, Jared. So we have a little bit of a controversial topic to shoot the shit about today. And this is the question or the issue with Samaria Rice, the whole Lil Baby Grammy performance debacle, Sean King's raggedy ass responding to the whole thing, and then a little bit more. So let me just start. So surely everybody's familiar with this controversy at this point, but essentially Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamir Rice, basically called out Lil Baby's Grammy performance that had like a scene of a cop shooting. And then he brought up Tamika Mallory, the quote unquote activist, celebrity activist afterward. And Samaria Rice basically called them out for being grifters, for being ambulance chasers, for being, junior pigs, and for clout chasing, and basically using Black Death and the killing of her son and others for celebrity, essentially, right? So, of course, Sean King, he writes this piece in the North Star called Understanding the Pain, Grief, and Fury of Samaria Rice, where he went on to defend Tamika Mallory and himself, of course, saying, among other bullshit, he said, quote, after Tamika's spoken word performance, Samaria posted this frustrated post about Tamika calling her a clout chaser. But I know Tamika very well, and this just isn't true. Her only intention with her performance, which I'll post below, was to use an important cultural moment to speak truth to power and call out President Joe Biden on his lack of movement on justice issues. It took tremendous guts. He goes on to say, for me, it gave substance and seriousness to the entire show. But then again, I know Tamika very well. She's as serious and substantive as one person could be. She's not in this for fame. And she didn't invite herself onto the show, but was recruited and invited there and chose to use the moment the best she could. I thought she nailed it. Had Tamika chosen instead to break it down in a dance with Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion, which she should still be allowed to do, honestly, then I'd understand the criticism, but that's not what happened. Tamika used a serious moment to deliver a fierce and serious message. Okay. So I'm just very struck, I think, by the sort of the intraracial class politics of this. And I think Sean King's response was particularly fucking tacky because nobody asked him to write that shit to explain her, Samaria Rice's quote unquote grief and frustration. And of course, he blames everybody but these celebrity activists who indeed and in fact are making money and are getting particular types of celebrity off of traveling from one police shooting to another and inserting themselves in those situations, ostensibly to bring, to get justice for these families. And so he and Tamika Mallory are basically the niggerati, of course, and they are the ones who have particular types of power and access and also just material benefits, while he's actually trying to drag basically Samaria Rice and sort of overshadow her righteous and her words. She knew what she was saying. He didn't need to go and explain how she was feeling. She knew exactly who she was calling out and why she was doing it. So that's the first part. The other part that struck me was when he said, that Tamika Mallory should have the right or whatever to dance with Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B if she wanted to. These are people who are supposed to be mobilizing for social justice. Why the fuck are they on Grammy carpets? Like, why are they walking the red carpet? Why are they inserting themselves into these huge pop culture situations? Like, why are they like, what does this have to do with social justice? Right. And so I'm ranting at this point. What are your thoughts on this piece? And then I'll go on to the next one.
I mean, look, we didn't do the shirt game yet in this episode. You got your renegade culture. I got my public
Renegade
enemy.
culture.
And I bring that up now because I'm from that is my era in my statement that I stand by to this day, regardless of where PE might be at this point. Who gives a fuck about a goddamn Grammy? Number one. Period. So that's always number one. This need for adoration and recognition from the state, from the elite, from the all. It's so whack on so many levels. And then when that bleeds over from celebrity into politics and activism, it just creates more and more problems. And that's where I think we are here, and where we are with this generation of event planning as opposed to political organization, attention grabbing as opposed to movement building. It leads to these kinds of mistakes and these kinds of errors and conflicts. So yeah, I mean, of course, Shaun King would have to come out and defend Tamika Mallory because he sees whatever their private relationship is or is not, I don't know, but he sees himself being attacked for sure. Period. When Samaria Rice comes out, so he has to say something, whether Tamika would want him to or not, whether they're on the same team or not, because ultimately they are. So anyway, I think we have to be more vigilant and willing to bring some focus and criticism to that, which claims to negate what I think you and I and many of us are out here trying to do.
Yeah. And then, and this whole speaking truth to power shit, I can't remember what platform I was on, but it was like this speaking truth to power is played out. It's like, we need to speak to each other. We need to speak with each other. And so that's exactly what it is. It's like shouting at the quote unquote powers that be is supposed to stand in for actual grassroots organizing and activism in itself. And it's like, just talking shit. Like, we all can talk shit just willy-nilly and say, Trump ain't shit and Biden ain't shit. Yeah, that's very easy, but that's not the work. And
especially saying that after he's elected, it don't matter. He's already chilling. He's already in there.
All right. So Samaria Rice released an official statement with Lisa Simpson, who's the mother of Richard Risher, who was gunned down by the LAPD in 2017. And so in their statement, they said Tamika D. Mallory, Shaun King, Benjamin Crump, Lee Merritt, Patrisse Cullors, Melina Abdullah, and the Black Lives Matter Global Network need to step down, stand back, and stop monopolizing and capitalizing off our fight for justice and human rights. We never hired them to be the representatives in the fight for justice for our dead loved ones murdered by the police. The quote activists have events in our cities and have not given us anything substantial for using our loved ones' images and names on their flyers. The attorneys in our fight are also misleading the impacted families. In the case of Tamir Rice, it was even questionable as to whether Benjamin Crump knew the law in depth in the state of Ohio. I fired him 6 to 8 months into Tamir's case. We don't want or need y'all parading in the streets, accumulating donations, platforms, movie deals, etc., off the death of our loved ones, while the families and communities are left clueless and broken. Don't say our loved ones' names, period. That is the truth. And I appreciate that, because it's like this whole say their names, and what these mothers are saying is don't fucking say their names to capitalize off of them. But also they have 6 demands. One is step down from the spotlight of the fights. Black Lives Matter Los Angeles needs to pay them for all the, pay them whatever it is that they ask, because they're benefiting off of those deaths. They want financial assistance for the Tamir Rice Foundation. They want housing funds for Lisa Simpson. And then they also want people in general to support the Tamir Rice Foundation, and then send personal donations to Samaria Rice and to Lisa Simpson. And so what's interesting about this statement and is that this statement was released, or it was the product, or it came out of a conference call with somebody named Rebecca A. Wilcox, whose name is R.A. Wilcox on Twitter. And so Nina Monet, who has been on this show and who is constantly drumming up the receipts, pulls up some tweets from Rebecca Wilcox, that says, from September 30th, 2020, that says, I have no faith that cishet Black men can be transformed. None. There's one from 2017 that says, every day I develop a true disdain for cishet Black men. There is one that says, abolish Black men at this point. That was on October 29th of 2020. And then Nina also did a search in her thread, and Rebecca Wilcox's thread for Tamir Rice or Mike Brown, and there's no results that come up prior to this moment. So the question then is, so it's like what it appears to be is a critique about those capitalizing on this moment coming from somebody who also appears to be capitalizing on this moment. So it's like a grift of calling out the grift. So, I mean, what the fuck? Yeah, and here, let me just state for the record, we are not trying to capitalize off of Nina's insights, okay? But I just, it's just, what I will say is that after, it's always I take these moments as a moment for self-criticism. A quote that I repeat often is by Walter Rodney when he says that intellectuals are enemies of the people until proven otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so, I just try to think about, okay, well, what am I doing with this show, right? Is this trying to capitalize off of issues? Is it sort of making entertainment out of real struggles, in organizations or within the, in the movement, so to speak, that I'm not necessarily a part of, my membership in Black Alliance for Peace notwithstanding. And I would like to think no, because number one, well, I'm not making no money off this. And second of all, like, I do want to intervene in the discourse and I want to give a platform for the critiques. And so, for example, something that Erica Kane said, and I just want to say I'm always learning from Erica. She's turned out to be one of my greatest teachers at this point. But she said on Facebook, people are latching onto this situation for their own objectives. Be mindful of that and understand only political education brings clarity through the mess. And I will say that I feel, part of what I'm thinking about with this whole situation is my ongoing critique of the niggerati, my ongoing critique of an analysis of intra-racial class dynamics, the way in which, my constant refrain that we don't need no more leaders. This is what happens when we have quote unquote leaders or these sort of this labor aristocracy when it comes to organizers and activists, where there are certain people who have clout and are able to garner resources, and then others who are, we don't even know their names, right? And they struggle to get any type of resources, and to have the causes that are meaningful to them or the campaigns that are meaningful to them even get any type of recognition. So I mean, and I don't know Rebecca Wilcox, like I don't know anything about her really other than I follow her on Twitter, but I think that Nina pointing out the contradiction or the contradistinction is actually really important, because there's a way in which this person might then be propped up as whatever, because we feel like, she did a good thing in having this conference call and offering up a way to release this statement. Yeah. So I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot. I think initially my first thought is specifically to what Nina did here is I think that the task she performed is a valuable one. And I think that all of us should be on some level beholden to that same kind of scrutiny. Right. I think there's a lot of things that could be said about that. For instance, I mean, I think it's fair to say that someone's personal education and focus could be shifted between the killing of Tamir Rice in 2014 and now in 2021 to be more focused and attentive to it now. Mm-hmm. I could see that as being legit. I could also see it being something to be held up as skepticism, especially if for a number of different factors could be brought in. I was thinking self-critically to your point. I mean, what would my timeline have looked like in 2014 around Tamir Rice and this issue? I don't know that I honestly don't know. I don't think that certainly I in my work wasn't covering the issue. So then the question for me becomes, well, what then if to the extent we're playing the roles of journalists or academic, public intellectual critics, isn't there? I think there is a certain level of responsibility to want to be able to comment and offer commentary. I certainly want to hear it from people like you and others, since we're going to have to suffer it from commercial spaces and those who I think have less righteous motives. I would want to definitely hear countervailing views on a lot of issues. There are issues that I want to hear people talk on that they don't really want to talk about, but I think are important, particularly for those of us who teach, and particularly for those of us who teach young Black, particularly Black women and men. I do think that we have to be able and willing to bring a certain focus and commentary to these kinds of issues, if for no other reason, to be able to communicate, I think, more important concepts and histories to them. So I get it. There's a fine line between, trying to intervene in a positive way and being seen as trying to take advantage of something. And that goes from journalism to academia all the time. Yeah. The last thing I'll say on that is that's why, going back a few episodes when we talked about the origins of BPM, this is why I think we've tried to put in certain fail safes to account for that, whether it's in terms of the redistribution of funds that are raised, collective decision making and critique. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say needs to happen outside of these spaces more often to mitigate the potentials for all of this. So anyway, I thank Nina for what she did. I think that kind of research is important. I think, and I think it provides some important points of departure for more conversation and thought and research, investigation, etc.
I guess the last thing that I'll say is, like, I just really believe we don't need no more leaders. We don't need to use the Super Bowl or the Grammys or the AMAs, whatever. We don't need to use those as platforms. Just like I don't believe we need Hollywood to tell our stories. We don't need Judas and the Black Messiah for an opportunity for political education. We don't need this Garvey movie from the position of a snitch to get us to talk about Garvey. We don't need this raggedy ass movie about Billie Holiday to get us to talk about the government's use of the war on drugs and anti-communism to stop our critiques of racial violence. We just don't need that shit. And I just really want us to get away from that model, that top-down model. And I just think it's whack. And I just hope that our platforms, we are not, we really continue to not be trying to pimp any type of moment. And we're just actually rooted in political education and trying to sort of point out the contradictions in these sorts of things. So, all right. So weigh in. I can't wait to see what people's ideas are in the chat. And so that's our Shoot the Shit for this week. All right, y'all. So for this interview section, I have another amazing, outstanding, very, very dope guest in Dr. Crystal Strong. So let me just say, I know Dr. Strong from our Berkeley days. So she was in anthropology. I was in Black studies. She was a few years ahead of me, but we would run into each other. And then after the fact, I have gone down to Philly one time for something. We linked up and just, she's always been a sort of mentor and an inspiration for me. So let me read her bio so you can get a sense of why. So Dr. Crystal Strong is an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania in the Graduate School of Education and a core organizer with Black Lives Matter Philly, the Black Philly Radical Collective, and the Pan-African Activist Solidarity Network. Her research and teaching focus on student and community activism, the cultural and political power of youth, and the role of schools as sites of struggle in Africa and the diaspora. She is currently at work on multiple projects which focus on African youth leadership, school protests in Africa, and storytelling and archiving Black Philadelphia. Her first book project, Apprentices to Power: Students and the Professionalization of Politics in Nigeria After Democracy, is an ethnography of post-military university student politics and the trappings of leadership after Nigeria's transition to civilian rule. Crystal's organizing work in the city of Philadelphia, her hometown, centers abolition, educational justice, political prisoners, and Pan-African solidarity. So as I said, she's so dope. So I'm so happy to have Dr. Crystal Strong here with me today. Hey!
CBS.
What's going on? Look at you. Okay, so what you repping on your shirt?
You know what? I knew I had to come with my political tea game correct. We all watch the show. We know you come with the political tea. So I got my Welcome to Philadelphia shirt on, which is an iconic image of the May 13th, 1985 bombing of the MOVE organization on Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia.
Dope shirt. Yeah, so important. See, you just out here. We just out here just doing it, man. All right. So my first question is, you are the archetypal, the consummate scholar, organizer, activist. Can you speak a bit about what you study, what work you do outside the academy, and if and or how your scholarship and activism are linked? And then, like, what are the difficulties in trying to balance scholarship and organizing and activism?
I love this question. I don't know if I am a consummate or archetype. I don't, see myself in that way, but I do know that, I came to the academy as an organizer first. And so any idea about myself as a scholar was fundamentally shaped by being an activist and an organizer first. So I got my start in student activism, like a lot of people. That informed my intellectual interests. In fact, my first real research, particularly as I was pursuing my PhD, was on student activism in Nigeria. And that was fundamentally shaped by being a student activist myself. And so the kind of work that I do really sits at the intersection of student and community organizing work. It also sits at the intersections of youth and education, but also just using research, scholarship, ethnography as a way of creating a kind of Pan-Africanist practice for myself. And, I see organizing and scholarship as connected, but I don't see scholarship necessarily as organizing work. Like, I think there's a way that it's like, that bullshit Jay-Z said, my presence is a gift. Like, I think sometimes scholars think because you might touch on radical shit, like radical work, that in and of itself is a form of organizing work. And so it's been very important to me, particularly as someone who is from the community that my current institution is in and has had an extractive, exploitative relationship, to remain connected to movement. That's something that's been important for me throughout my entire academic career. It's informed my work. Most of the questions that I'm thinking about have to do with how young people, how communities build and sustain movements, the challenges that we face in building and sustaining movements. And there's ways that I think more recently I have been a bit more transparent about my organizing work. I mean, at the beginning, I was kind of leading a double life in the sense that I saw those worlds as disconnected, right? So I have my organizing life and I have my sort of academic tenure track scholarly life. And I've realized more so is that we actually need to see people who are doing both, right? Like it's important for us to see that people are not just talking about movements, are not just doing work that sort of touches on movements, but that we're actually like really trying to figure out what does it mean to remain in movement work, to have our work materially, tangibly benefit movements that are happening right now. And so these are some of the things that I think about, but it's not easy. It's not rewarded.
Period.
I'm sure that the powers that be would prefer that I just focused on publishing and like the very narrow definition of service. But at the end of the day, like we have to do us. And if our measure of our purpose is what we are contributing to our community's freedom struggle, then I think we have to have a different metric about what our work is.
Period. No, it's so funny when you were speaking about, my presence is a present, kiss my ass, basically, right? In terms of how academics approach, their writing as activism or whatever. I was just thinking about how, radicalism can be an object of inquiry, but that doesn't make you a radical, right? You can still uphold all of the structures of the university, the way that you treat your students, the way that you actually participate or don't participate in modes of organizing. So that's such an important
And the way you capitalize off of movements that are happening. I think, I think the experience of the 2020 uprisings was really revealing about how far we have to go, especially in terms of these conversations. Like we saw the anti-racism industrial complex form. We see the way that and I'm sure all the conferences are going to be talking about what, Cherise? Abolition. Right?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
The grammars of movement, but what the hell are you actually doing in community in conjunction with movements besides getting in a bag?
Period. Listen, Abolish the abolitionist industrial complex that is a function of
the abolition industrial complex, the public statement industrial complex, the co-founder industrial complex, all of that.
There's a think piece industrial complex. I've talked previously about the memoir industrial complex. Like it's bad. But also that, this is also a function of the neoliberalization of the world, where everything becomes a commodity or an opportunity to get a bag, as you're saying. And
absolutely.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit, but still relatedly, I want to speak about your excellent 2017 article called "Do African Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter? Youth Uprisings and the Borders of Solidarity," in which you argue that U.S. scholars and activists need to engage with struggles in Africa and other global contexts to emphasize that Black lives everywhere are indeed valuable and meaningful. So what are some of the takeaways from that piece? And has Black activism in the U.S. become more internationalist or Pan-Africanist since you published that piece? I guess that's like 4 years ago now. Yeah. And then a related question is, how can activists, organizers, and scholars cultivate a radical internationalist or Pan-African outlook?
I really appreciate you just, elevating that piece that I wrote, which, when you are invited to write a piece, right? Like I was asked to write about, education struggles and organizing work in Africa in the quote unquote BLM era. Now, I was asked to write about that, but what I wanted to write about was this sort of question that I was grappling with, and I continue to grapple with, which was, where is Africa in our Black freedom movement, particularly from the gaze of the sort of global North, the US, right? Mm-hmm. At the time, that I was writing, it was 2016, 2017, Fees Must Fall in South Africa had formed. I'd actually experienced Occupy Nigeria in 2012, a few years earlier. And I was really just like kind of stunned between the gap between the profession of a commitment to globalism, which is one of BLM's guiding principles. But then when movements are forming, when they're happening, we don't even get a solidarity statement. It seemed like there was a real contradiction there around this like metaphoric, symbolic solidarity with African people, and how we elevate how we are actually connected to movements that are happening right now. Right. And I think there's a larger critique I'm also trying to make about the way that many of us diasporan Africans, the way that many of us treat Africa as this sort of fictive, imaginative, landscape, right? Where there aren't real people right now.
People now
with material conditions. It's like, the Afrofuturist perspective, which I really appreciate a lot of Afrofuturist work, but there is a kind of way that sometimes that gets a little fictive, right? Like we're not talking about a real contemporary Africa, or if you look at the kind of African with K and I'm not, again, like I've gone through all of these kind of modalities of attempting to sort of connect to African people in Africa. But, either Africa's kind of imagined past, right? This glorified past, or this imagined future. And so I'm really trying to think through that, or invite us, especially those of us who are most proximal to empire, which means that we have access to these digital infrastructures that make elevating, simply retweeting a hashtag, which actually materially affects movements. It helps keep people safe. That visibility literally helps keep organizers safe in many situations. And really calling in our folks to, number one, interrogate, like, what is the Black in our Black liberation movement? Does that include the entire African continent? Does it include Pan-African struggle, which for hundreds of years has been at the core of our liberation work, but seems to be kind of dislocated and retreating in this moment? And in addition to that, like, can we extend just like even basic support, right? That can actually be materially beneficial to struggles while they are happening. And so those were some of the things that I was thinking about. To your other question, do I feel like there's more sort of internationalism? I mean, I do see some things that make me excited. Like, I think even in the realm of popular culture, we are seeing more, especially for diasporans, more efforts, imperfect as they may be, to kind of connect with Africa, to identify with Africa. And that stuff matters, right? Like, all right, coming to America, we know we can have all the critiques, and I don't mean coming to America, the new one, but, I know as a shorty, like as a kid coming up, it was those imperfect popular representations that made me understand that you are not just a Black girl, you are an African in this land, right? And so I think a new generation is kind of seeing these representations that allow us to understand ourselves as we are, which is as African people, right? But, I do think we still need a lot more effort, a lot more intentionality and purpose around actually connecting with African people, African movements, right, that are happening right now, and thinking very critically about how we can leverage our access, the power we do have being most proximal to empire, to support our own movements, but also movements around the Pan-African world.
All right. No, Crystal, everything you said is so spot on and so fire. And indeed, in your paper, what you write is the movement for Black lives and the African youth mobilizations that you examine in the article should both be understood as part of a broad escalation of youth-led revolt over the past decade. Anti-austerity protests in Europe and North America, global Occupy movements, the Arab Awakening, anti-corruption protests in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and our concern, the movement for Black lives, have all shifted mass action and fundamental critiques of capitalism, structuralized oppression, liberal democracy, and white supremacy to the fore. But then you go on to say that sort of the connections between these movements and then the broader global movements where generally don't necessarily get the attention that they deserve. And I just think that that's so important because, for example, we can make connections between NSARS and then the movement aspects of ousting Museveni. So like, not getting entrapped in the cult of personality with Bobby Wine, for example, because he turned out to be whatever he is, but the actual movement to oust a dictator, like these are connected. The struggle that's going on in Senegal right now, efforts to stop the bombing of Somalia, right, in connection with, what's happening in Haiti, getting, Jovenel Moise out, like all of these are connected because they are, manifestations of those structures of domination that you outlined in that article. And we do need to see that, it's not just Black Americanness that matters and that's under duress. It's all of these forms of domination that are linked.
Exactly. And also, I think, that was an academic article, right? It had a particular audience. It was in an urban education audience. And so I tried to freak it so that I could say what I really wanted to say outside of just an argument about, wow, we really need to think about and think with youth-led movements around educational justice in Africa, right? That's one piece of it. But, as an organizer, movements need support. We don't need simply, professions of solidarity, which are valuable in a sense. But in the moment of a movement, when you are trying to sustain momentum, having visibility actually helps sustain a movement. Being able to mobilize resources quickly to support movements, to bail people out, to support people who are, political prisoners. These things actually matter in the moment. And we have the capacity to create those structures and systems to do that, but we have not, at a systemic level, right? And so that is part of the kind of work I've been doing more recently, to not just sort of think about and intellectualize these things, but to actually connect organizers who are on the front lines of movements in different, contexts throughout our Pan-African world.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's what you said is a very important visibility of movements, not of individuals,
right? Of course.
Who then think that they embody the movement. So
right.
More about that a little bit later. But okay, so you're a key organizer or a core organizer in the BLM Philly chapter. So first of all, can you speak about some of the work y'all have going on and some of the campaigns y'all are launching? But also, the Philly BLM chapter was one of the 10 chapters that sought to hold the global network accountable in terms of how money was being spent, among other issues. So can you talk about that rift or that split or that critique? And what has it been like navigating that conflict publicly?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I've been a core organizer with Black Lives Matter Philly for over 4 years now. Actually, very shortly after I moved home to Philly after being in Cali for my PhD for, 8 years. I moved home and was looking for an organizational home. And so some of the work that we do at BLM Philly, it cuts across a lot of different areas. We've been doing a lot of work around police and prison abolition. Obviously, that's been sort of highlighted after the uprisings of 2020, but we were a founding organizational member of the Philadelphia Community Bail Fund, which literally bails out members of our community who are only in prison because they can't afford bail. Right. We also have been sort of holding space for, folks who have been killed by state violence, but also killed by intercommunal violence in our communities, and really thinking alongside our community members about how we tackle what is going on in our community around state violence, but also intercommunal violence, which is, of course, connected to state violence and derives from state violence. In addition to that, more recently, we helped found a coalition, the Black Philly Radical Collective, which is a number of local Black radical abolitionists, I would say revolutionary organizations that have been doing work around abolition in different ways, and not necessarily even using the term abolition, but around community control of police, right? Opposing state violence when police kill us. Like I said, ending cash bail in the city of Philadelphia as one sort of pathway to getting police completely defunded and abolished. And so what we saw was that after the uprisings, and in Philadelphia, we were in the streets for months.
Yes.
We kept the streets lit for months and months and months. And part of what we felt we needed to do was come together and have organizational unity and cohesion around what abolition must look like now. And so we crafted 13 demands around abolition that I think really create a blueprint for our city. And it's been picked up and sort of, examined in other contexts around what a pathway to abolition can look like in the next 5 years. Apart from that, we do a lot of work around educational justice, Black Lives Matter at School Week, which is now a kind of national campaign for radical teacher unions to really elevate anti-Black violence, but also Black liberation work in schools. We have been a partner in that from its inception in 2017 or 2018. In addition to that, we've got other things like the Brick by Brick Fund for Political Prisoners, which was founded after the passing of Delbert Africa, who many people may know as a member of the Move 9. He was released after over 41 years of incarceration, just in January of 2020, and he died within 6 months of being released. And so part of what that showed us is that, we, first of all, the Move 9 being free right now, after decades of struggle to, saying free the Move 9, to see them freed has been one of the most just inspiring things in my organizing life. To see our elder revolutionaries who were late teens and early 20s come home has been so, it reminds us that we can actually win, right? But apart from that, what happens after political prisoners come home? We imagine Mumia coming home. We imagine Maroon Schultz coming home. But are we prepared to support them, to help sustain their lives, to help provide medical care for them after they've been in these cages that are literally trying to kill them, either directly or through medical neglect? That's what's happening with Mumia right now. So the Brick by Brick Freedom Fund campaign is raising life-sustaining resources for former political prisoners, namely the Move 9, but also 10 current political prisoners in the state of Pennsylvania, including the folks I've just mentioned, but also it's building legal defense support for people who are currently being targeted for their activism and their organizing work, like the Move 9 were, like Mumia was. So, for example, my comrade Ant Smith on a federal charge. Like we were together the night before he was arrested. Like we were all responding to the murder of Walter Wallace Jr. And so he was swept up in that. And so we have to be prepared for the state to come for us like they've come for our elders, right? And so the Brick by Brick Fund is sort of thinking ahead for the need to support current, former, and potential political prisoners.
Yeah, I would just want to lift up our comrade Dedan Wakuri, who is in Black Alliance for Peace, who is also caught, I think, a state level charge in, I want to say Greensboro, North Carolina, same thing. And they keep on delaying his court case, which is, he called this political intimidation, but it just goes to show the injustice of our system and the ways in which they target people actually struggling for liberation in a number of ways, whether it's arresting people just to get their fingerprints and take their phones and take their data, whether it's through cash bail so that they keep people in jail, whether it's pushing back their court dates to prolong these forms of intimidation and surveillance. So so that's and such important
people from joining the work too, right?
Yes.
Like it is no surprise that in a moment of heightened and perhaps even unprecedented, at least in perhaps our lifetimes, Black insurgency, the state is bringing all of the resources at its disposal to target people who are visible, to de-radicalize, to infiltrate and co-opt, which reminds me of the other part of your question that I didn't attend to, which is the BLM 10, right? Which, so I think it's important some of this is out there in the public sphere. I highly encourage people to read the statement that we released, which I think says, much of what needs to be said, right? At least the skeleton of it. But I do think part of what I think is very important about this moment is that, there has been a lot of confusion about just over the years, right? About the movement for Black Lives Matter as a chapter organization, but also this kind of national entity that has co-founders that is kind of elevated as the kind of leaders of this movement.
The Nobel Prize nominees.
Right, that is a collective movement. And then the actual chapters that do the work. Right. And so speaking from my perspective as an organizer with the Philly, with BLM Philly, we had very little relationship with the sort of national entity. We didn't receive any significant material support, although people assume we did because they see what is happening at the national level, which makes our local organizing work more challenging, right? That confusion. But then, we were wanting to, there is value. One of the reasons why I joined an international chapter organization is because there is value in having mass organizations. There is value in having chapters or cadres in various different places that can learn from each other, extend resources to one another, uplift one another, but also build collective alignment to help build a larger movement than our local context, right? And so I think many of us were trying to internally struggle around all of the contradictions that are very obvious right now. Because one, we see value in building a mass organization in this moment, right? But then also, we saw value in being a part of a chapter-led organization, but we also recognize that it actually plays into the hand of white supremacy and the system, the state, which is always seeking ways to delegitimize our work, right? We saw and understood and still understand and grapple with the risk of airing out, quote unquote, dirty laundry in the ways that actually makes our own work less sustainable in some ways, right? By association. And so I think part of the long time internal struggle, some of which was public. I mean, there have been chapters who disaffiliated. It's not as if this is coming out of nowhere, but
right.
We want to be able to continue to advance this struggle, right? And so I think, as we see in a lot of different contexts where there is conflict, where there is harm that is happening, there is a way that the concerns around like delegitimizing the larger like organizing space, it creates cover for people who are doing harmful things.
Yeah. It reminds me of like when there's different types of sexual assault or sexual misconduct in particular organizations, and all the work collapses because of and so because there is the internal struggle that needs to be done, but then when it because of the prominence of Black Lives Matter, it ultimately becomes public, right? And so it also reminds me of like all the struggles in Black studies. And so there was a situation recently in the Chronicle of Higher Education about UCLA, and these struggles are very prevalent in Black studies spaces in general. And what we don't want to do is construct Black spaces or Black organizations or Black movements as dysfunctional objectively, right? And that's what can happen when all of these things become outward facing, is that it's like, see, basically, we should have never taught these niggas how to read or whatever, right? That's ultimately what it boils down to, because like they can't get along, they don't have it, they can't, they're unscrupulous with money, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's that fine line between holding ourselves accountable internally, but also keeping some semblance of like a united front or defending our self-determination from those sort of attacks, so it's difficult. It seems, especially with the BLM situation, it seems very difficult. I know it's difficult from the Black studies perspective because I have many critiques of Black studies, but trust and believe I'm defending Black studies, raggedy as it might be in particular cases, against any delegitimization campaign. But at the same time, there's also individuals or even cadres of individuals that I think are super problematic and that need to be called out and that need to be, held accountable. So,
and one of the things that's challenging too is like, we are doing the work. You know what I mean? Like the programs I described to you, I can think about other chapters around the country who are leading like mutual aid efforts. They are like first responders when people are like shot or killed, right? Like they're building like Black owned marketplaces and grocery stores. They're developing schools. They're creating affordable housing units. Like we are doing incredible work. And so like when you think about and many of us are like, we got whole full-time jobs, like,
right.
Every situation is different, but in Philadelphia, we're all volunteers, right? So we're trying to help, like, contribute to our movement locally, but we're also and we have to deal with like, just how do you build and maintain an organization? That's always hard, period, right? Even in the best of circumstances, like how do you bring people in, retain them, continue to grow, build alignment, navigate conflict. So you're navigating all of that, and then also having to try to contend with this kind of nebulous entity that is not forthcoming with information that, I learned a lot just in the media coverage like that.
Right.
that AP article that like broke things down. That was the first time I read a lot of that information.
Yikes. Yeah. Well, relatedly, I have a related question. I just don't have any follow-up for that. I have a related.
It is what it is, as they say, what a TI is. Okay.
What it is, right? Okay. So finally, I want to get your perspective about this situation that has been unfolding over the last few days which involves Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamir Rice, and her critique of the Grammy performance by Lil Baby, and then that also featured Tamika Mallory. And she basically said that Tamika Mallory and others were clout chasing and, fuck a Grammy because her son is dead. And that essentially these are like soft pigs basically, right? That are essentially capitalizing off of Black death. So I want you to weigh in on this, not because it's like salacious gossip or tea, but because like this notion of grift and of people pimping the movement and pimping the moment or using the moment for a bag is a real one. And especially you as somebody who's like in the streets doing programming, doing organizing, and doing real struggle. What has your experience been with the quote unquote celebrity, the celebrity activists, and then what is your perspective on Samaria Rice's her critique?
I really appreciate your question, and I'm just going to say off top, I stand with Samaria Rice. I think about all of the families that have lost, their loved ones who have become hashtags, who have become like the means through which people become elevated as like professional organizers, like celebrity organizers that build organizations, right? And are not only dealing with their grief, many of them are dealing with like so much economic hardship. They're trying to figure out what justice means for them, battling system, the system around that as well. And so I am so just sympathetic to her pain, right? Tamir Rice would have turned 18 in 2020, just like Ayanna Stanley Jones would have turned 18 in 2020. And, that is just an unspeakable pain and loss that I think we need to send all the love that we have to Samaria Rice and all of the families behind our movement.
And resources. And love and resources.
I mean, I was going to come to that too.
Yeah.
Love, but also support, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to redirect the support from nebulous entities to the folks who are actually doing the work, who have actually been most affected by the issues that we're struggling around. But I want to tell like a tiny little, give some examples about what this looks like in practice. So May 30th, 2020 was the first major protest after the murder of George Floyd. We, the Black Philly Radical Collective, formed like literally 2 days before that and decided to do our first action of many that would transpire over the next, 5-6 months. And we are like experienced organizers, have organized many a protest and action when the lights and the cameras weren't there. So we know what it means to like organize a protest that is thoughtful, that has a purpose, that has a political message and political education, that has clear demands, or, it's formed for a reason. So we show up to the spot, the Art Museum, which if you ever have been to Philadelphia, it's, the Rocky Steps, right? It's an iconic location. Yeah. Thousands of people came out. But guess what happened? We pull up. But guess who also pulls up? Folks we've never seen before who have a bullhorn, who are trying to sort of craft an image of being an organizer. And, it started out as a really dope action. We had like speakers, we were providing political information and, what have you, but it got derailed because a bunch of niggas showed up with a bullhorn. And so I bring this example up because I saw this all the time in the streets. You don't know who, if you are someone who is attending a protest, you don't know who is who necessarily if they have a bullhorn. And so that person could be marching you to any place. They could be marching you to danger. They could be sharing with you a message of police reform. They could be telling you that body cameras are the way to go. They might be telling you a kind of anti-abolitionist message, right? You don't know what they're going to tell you because they may not be even attached to an organization. And I want to be careful here because I think something beautiful happened in this most recent set of uprisings, which is that a lot of people moved into the work.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of younger people, especially, like moved into the work. Right. You can start an organization. You can, start an effort. You can participate. We need all hands on deck for this. Right. Like my whole thing is I think everybody should be an organizer, right? That's where I come. That's like my politic. We should all be organizers. If by organizer, it means that you are contributing to our struggle, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, after Walter Wallace Jr. was murdered, there was a kind of descent upon the city of Philadelphia by national organizations, including Until Freedom, which is Tamika Mallory's organization. And I'll tell you that Walter Wallace Jr. was murdered on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
There was a call from an unknown source for an action on Saturday on the block where Walter Wallace Jr. was murdered. That was then sponsored by Until Freedom. And we in the local organizing community had to like intercept that, because how can you bring thousands of people to the site where someone was just murdered, a community that is grieving, that literally watched one of their like community members get murdered in the street, and then you want to come with a get out the vote bus? And so anyway, without getting into all of the details, it was a really volatile situation that we were forced to intervene in. The community didn't want people on the block, understandably so. It was a lot of people who are not from Philly, who are not from West Philly, which is where it happened, and who were just showing up, you know, hundreds, thousands of people deep into a community that is grieving, right? And so it was a really volatile situation that was created by this kind of like ambulance chasing effect.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, and the same thing happened in Louisville. We have comrades, you know, BLM Louisville, a number of great people who are in that community, who have been doing that work. But all you hear about is Breonna Khan. Right?
Which was exactly a con.
And so I'm saying all of that to say that, like, I've seen that happen firsthand. It is actually quite dangerous, not just like ideologically dangerous, right? Because you don't, like, if you are coming to tell people to get out the vote when we are dealing with a police
Mm-hmm.
murder, like, this is not, there's nothing radical, revolutionary, or on point about that, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing helpful about that, right? But then, you know, it's also like you're actually
physically dangerous
safety, right?
Right.
Because, you know, there's a lot of measures we take to make sure that we have like security or like measures to reduce the possibility of certain kinds of confrontation. We have medics on hand. Like we come with a plan for the community, for ourselves, for the people. And so, you know, I fully understand. I don't know Samaria Rice personally, but I know people who have been connected to her. And what she's saying is what we were saying, right? Which is that there is this exploitative character of what a lot of the like visible organizing work that we're seeing. Most people, you don't know their names unless you maybe are in that community, unless maybe you're in that city. And I think that's how it should be to a great extent, right? But when we see this kind of, supposedly we are a leaderful movement, but yet some people are being elevated. And this is what I was talking about with the co-founder industrial complex, like that raises contradictions about, you know, what you are doing. And I'm not here to say that someone's a cop or an op or what have you, but I'm looking at your impact, right? I'm looking at your impact.
It's
and
obvious.
Your impact is oppish.
Obvious and
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's something that I want to also point out that, of course, comes from, again, Nina Monet, who is always pointing out our, you know, the hatred of poor people, you know, to use the academic term, aporophobia. And the fact that, you know, I really think that, you know, people think that just because these are poor or working class communities that you can just do whatever you want in them. That because these are poor and working class families that are under siege by the police, that you can just do whatever you want with the image, with the name, and with the circumstances of these people, because we're used to dispossessing poor people. We're used to expropriating poor people. We're used to extracting everything that poor, especially poor Black people have, right? And so I can't help but point out that dynamic. And the organizer industrial complex, these are affluent people. They're getting paid thousands and in some, even millions of dollars to do this stuff, because you have to have dough to be able to just get up and move, to be able to just hop on a plane, to be able to sponsor. What does it even mean to sponsor a movement? This ain't the Rose Bowl.
Right.
And so
that reminds me of the Wells Fargo sponsored poverty tour, if you remember that. Do you remember that?
I don't.
It was Tavis Smiley and Cornell West Wells Fargo sponsored poverty tour.
Oh no!
And this was right after the revelation of how Wells Fargo had been doing the predatory. Like, it was right after that report.
Well, I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you hearing that firsthand perspective. Yeah,
I mean, I appreciate you really elevating that, because there is a role for all, truly radical Black people in this struggle, right? Like, we need the folks who are most affected at the front to be guiding this work. But it doesn't mean that, if you are X, Y, or Z, that you don't have a place in movement work, right? It just might not be at the front. It just might not be, and so I think, I really value what you just shared, which is that, what kind of anti-Blackness is operating within your politics that assumes that you know what a particular community needs, right? That assumes that you know what all Black people need, regardless of context. That assumes period, right? And so, I mean, I think about we had so many. Anyway, like Philadelphia, where our homicides right now are just off the charts. Yeah. And, in the midst of our organizing work last summer, a little boy, Zamar Jones, 7 years old, was killed while he was playing outside, killed in front of the block that he lived on has 100 children, literally 100 children. And they watched their friend get killed by a stray bullet. Horrible. And I think about, when that happened, several of us organizers went to the community, and we didn't go thinking that we know the answers, right? Because we don't, clearly. But we went to see what that particular family, what that community needs, right? And we spent weeks actually just building with that community, offering support, seeing about mental health resources. There was a food distribution that we did in that community. There were, books and, book bags that we brought in for the 100 children on that block. But over time, we wanted to understand, okay, what would support look like for you all in this moment? And part of what we arrived at through, that process was that the community wanted to heal and wanted to celebrate this little boy's life who was murdered. And so we, after many, many conversations, decided to do basically a community day, right? Yeah. Where the community could come together. I mean, healing, justice, joy. If our movement is not joyful, right? If we don't recall and remind ourselves of what it means to love each other, to affirm each other, I really question, what we think we're building here. But anyway, I'm using that example as a way that when you're community centered, right? When you have a politic that centers the folks that are most marginalized, you don't show up like the way you described. You show up to be in community. And it's a long process, right? You don't just helicopter in and then you out after the bag has been caught. But how are you continuing to sustain those relationships? I mean, that's the part of organizing that is most challenging, but it's also the most rewarding, because ultimately, what is our liberation movement if we're actually not trying to be in community with each other?
Yeah. On that note, with that good word, sis, like, thank you so much for being here. And like, as always, I learned so much from you, and I appreciate your candor and just, your love for our people. Like, but we need more of that. Like, we need people who love us and not just see us as an opportunity to come up. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love the show. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I admire you so much. And, I remember the first day I met you, you had your little AKA, you had your little bomber jacket on, but, your work is incredible and the space is incredible. So thank you for all that you do for us. And, Black love, Black power, free them all.
All right, y'all, for this segment of In These Tweets, we have two very, very special guests, Squad Gang. That is Jackie and Baba Lukman. Thank y'all for joining us today.
What's up, y'all?
What's happening? What's happening?
So I cannot wait to dig into this timeline. Y'all have all of the good tweets. All right, so I'm going to start with the first one. The first one is from March 5th, 2021. And it says, where are the white progressive voices advocating to free Black and Native political prisoners? Ooh. Julian Assange and Edward Snowden have a lot of company. # free Mumia Abu-Jamal, # free Leonard Peltier. So can you speak a little bit about that tweet and
please
where that came from?
That was you. Because see, he be tweeting undercover when I'm not looking. But you're right. So what? I mean, why did you tweet that?
Well, I tweeted it because of the conversation that you and I had that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I went on, as I always do when I get up in the morning, I try to check out all the news sources. And so when I think I was on Al Jazeera or something like that. It was a foreign news source. And they just kept talking about Snowden. And then they were talking about Julian Assange. And, and it just, I mentioned it to you. Mm-hmm. And then you was like, wow, these white liberals, they never mentioned Mumia. They never mentioned
right.
Imam Jamil Al-Amin. They never mentioned
Sundiata Akoli.
Right. So that came out of our conversation that we had that morning. And so she, as she always do, she talking about our undercover tweet. Well, she gets me fired up. Like she'll drop stuff at me because she knows that I don't have much filter, right? So she'll be like, so she'll encourage me to, and get me all mad and stuff. And then while she's on Sputnik, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And now I'm just going on all platforms, just blowing stuff up. So I was like, you know what? You're right, Jackie. Yeah, them white liberals don't never talk about me. They don't never this that. So then that's what caused, yeah. So that's what. But in all sincerity, we meant that because especially as we know about Mamia's conditions and how he's been treated and Leonard Peltier. You hardly ever hear his name. You hardly hear the name of a lot of our political prisoners, and they're not the darlings of the white liberal press. So
and it kills me, with people, and this is not just with white liberals. This is with some of our folks too, who are always talking about Assata taught me. But these are the same people who don't recognize that Assata was in community with folks like Sundiata Akoli. So you can wear a t-shirt and talk about Assata taught me.
In the car with.
Right, in the car
so,
with. Yeah.
Okay, Assata taught you, but who taught Assata? Who was Assata rolling with? Who were they, down with? And I kind of question like some of the, and I have to admit, like, these are things I had to learn too. So I have to be careful that I'm not beating up on our people because of what they don't know, because we all didn't know what we know now at some point. But, we've seen, especially with white liberals, that, that Julian Assange is, yes, it's horrible, the repression that he's under, and he should not be criminalized for being a journalist. But Mumia Abu-Jamal is still in prison because he's a journalist and reporting on the crimes of the state against Black people. So that hypocrisy in especially white left progressive circles online, that was just another example of that we've seen, the whole time. It's just a mess.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great point. Man, y'all always on point. That's such a, I mean, I have no follow-up. So next tweet, Jared, it's the mic drop.
So, well, the only follow-up I would add is that I actually reached out to most of those white left folks and invited them directly to step up their game in reporting on Mumia as much as they are on Assange. And Ben Norton from the Gray Zone responded, and Richard Medhurst, who does, I think, some good work coming out of the Syrian community, responded positively. But we'll see. We'll see. But anyway, I appreciate
my breath.
Well, that's
anyway. We must always have hope.
You can have hope.
Since
you know I'm the one who does not have hope in this.
As they say, you can hope in one hand and shit in the other. Yep. Which one fills up first? So, anyway.
Or as the late Steve Coakley used to say, hope is dope.
Yeah, hope is dope.
So, Baba Luke,
either way.
Yes, sir.
Just real quick, since it's so rare that the testosterone is so high on this program, I thought I would take this moment to ask you about a tweet recently from you where you actually talked about some work you're now doing with Brother Ray Wilkerson, launching the launch of the Waters of Healing, and its specific relationship, and why you put it together, and particularly why now.
Well, oh man, Jared, I'm glad you asked about that, man. We've been getting a lot of good responses from men about this too. This actually started. It actually came as an idea to me last year, and I was going through my own personal struggles, and I was dealing with my own personal struggles, and then other men that I was in contact with, we would share similar struggles, because you know how it is, as men, we're very private with that, and so I said, well, look, let me deal with my own personal issues, and I said, and when I was started to do that, then I was like, you know what, I'm not the only guy that are dealing with certain issues, and then I had to examine, like, how did I get here? Like, how did I get from point A to where I'm at now? And what do I need to do to get out of that rut? So when I started to think about it, it just started to just formulate. I as I always do, I get an idea and I pass it by Jackie. And I told Jackie what my vision was about it. And she was like, well, yeah, I think that's a good thing. She said, just work on it, because this lady right here, I really value, because naturally I am not the type of person, I have a lot of insecurities. And so, and this just goes back to my childhood, but I'm not here. Y'all don't have a couch. So I'm not going to get on it. But anyway, but my point being is that,
as a matter of fact, though,
right. So, so Jackie has really served that position, like, really the helpmate part, where she encouraged me to do things where if it was just left on to me, it would just remain an idea and that's it. So, so my cousin, Ray, he's actually my blood cousin, and he himself just recently discovered my side of the family because of some family dynamic bullshit that we were going through, the outside child and this and that and other, and all of the other stuff that just happens with human life, with human beings, Mm-hmm. And so when him and I developed a relationship, and we found out that we went through similar stuff coming up, as boys and then into our adulthood. And so we was like, wow, this is kind of common amongst the men we know, the men we grew up with, and there was no outlet for us to express that. And what really sealed it for me was I was doing research, and I just happened to go across, I don't know if many of you remember Sherazade Ali's book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I would just happen.
Please don't punch me in the face. I don't want to get punched in the mouth. I don't want
it. So what happened was I saw an old broadcast of Phil Donahue when she was a guest on that show, and so I said, well, let me, because I do that. So I said, let me watch this, because I do remember watching that show in real time when it did come on. So I said, wow, and it just brought back when I seen black men in the audience trying to express how they felt and how black women just shut them down, like, you know, and I said, wow, you know, we get that a lot, you know, like we get that a lot, not to you know, to disparage black women or anything, but I just think it's a socialization thing, and you know, and we, a lot of times black men, we hold on to these issues because I know for me personally, I felt nobody wanted to hear them. So, you know, so it just eats you up inside, and you start making bad choices in life, and you start doing these things. So Ray and I, we got together and we said, look, we don't know what we're doing. We're just led by the spirit. We don't know what we're doing, but, you know, but we need to at least get men to start talking. And so we put these things together. And now he comes from a more Christian, you know, base with his solutions. I, you know, having experience with Islam and Christianity and other things, I'm coming from it more of a cultural solution, you know. So and you know, we both, you know, understand that, you know, he has his way of dealing with it, I have my way. And my solution is that I feel like, you know, black men, we need to return back to our base culture, our base African culture. You know, and just the basics, you know, that is shared by, you know, I know we don't know what the
Right.
yeah, but there are certain things that I remember growing up that we don't even practice anymore, you know, like, you know, so we started to just look at that. But we this is like, we just did our second broadcast, and I mean, just today I still get men that hit me up in my what they call it, the mess,
the
Inbox.
inbox.
Inbox, yeah.
See, he really is the 1965.
Right.
He doesn't know what
So
these things.
I mean, and a couple people.
But
that was
the first thing you did correct though is that you win in the second half. That's what me and my crew talk about. We struggled in the first half of life, then we married up.
Right,
and we're winning in the second half. So you clearly have, you know, that's the first example I think you're presenting to the world. So we appreciate that for sure.
And just to finish up on this point is that you know, we didn't know how men were going to receive it. So we, you know, men are still hitting me up, man, in my inbox talking about just this morning. I showed Jackie, a guy hit me up this morning, and he was like, man, he said, he said, I'm a fan of y'all's from Black Power Media. And he was asking, and I'm glad we're doing this with y'all, because he wanted to know why we're not putting that on Black Power Media. So I said, well, you know, that's not really our decision to make. I said, but, you know, if it's okay with the rest of the squad, we don't have no problem with it.
I thought it was BPM. I absolutely see, this is my perspective. I think that just like women, we need our yeah girl and our ooh girl spaces. I think men need their own. We all need our own homosocial spaces where we just are with our girls. And then I think that there's other spaces or where, you know, or men are just with each other, because I feel like there's just different types of conversations that happen, period. I also think that we need spaces where we all genders come together. But I don't think that, and it's, you know, it's not patriarchal, it's not misogynist, it's not sexist for men to want to get together and have their own spaces, especially spaces of healing. Like women don't need to be in that all the time. And we also don't need to hold that. So it's like, y'all can get y'all shit together, and we don't need to hold all that stuff. We can, you know, talk about the revolution or whatever it is we gonna do. So I appreciate that. Related to this conversation, on March 12th, 2021, Kwame Bioho, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said, the Lukman Nation has set a new standard for what a revolutionary couple is supposed to be. I want nothing less than what they have, to which y'all responded, we thank you, Kwame. It is truly a labor of love that we both enjoy what we are doing. And so can you talk a little bit more about what does it mean to be a revolutionary couple, to have revolutionary love? You know, I'm writing about that. I have a project that I'm going to write about that. I call it mutual comradeship, but like, what's it like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you use that phrase, mutual comradeship, because I think that when we met, we didn't know that each other had the political ideology that we did. And I was certainly, mine was certainly repressed because I was still in the church very much. And you know, single Black woman in the church, I'm battling with these messages of you need a husband to be holy. And me being a person, I'm just like, no, the fuck, I really don't. But okay. And when we met at a Christian singles retreat that neither one of us wanted to be at. And I mean, there's a whole long story behind that, but we start talking, and we were both really like hoping that the other one were not like these superficial Negroes that we had, dealt with for all this long time and made both of us jaded. I'm hoping that he's not just going to talk about sports, and he's hoping that I'm not just going to talk about like the new designer bag or whatever.
Shopping. Yep.
Right. And when we both realized that we both love to talk about politics and social issues, we couldn't stop talking to each other. So
that was actually the first date.
That was the first date that we were like on the phone for like 3 hours, him up in New Jersey and me in DC. And as time goes on, we realize, wait, we are both very committed to racial justice, better for our people. We both have a serious interest in our African roots. Oh my God, we're both Pan-Africanists. And I think we realized that we were comrades in that sense before we like realized we liked each other, in that way, like being in each other's company. And we liked the way each other thought. So that, I think for me, I definitely felt like, no matter what happens, I could vibe with this dude. I think he's my friend. And that was more valuable than anything. Cause I'm just antisocial. And once you piss me off, I'm just really done. I'm 54. I don't have time for that stuff anymore. It's just, I'm tired. I need my nap. I don't have time for people and their drama. So look, life is short. So I really just liked him as a person and the way he thought. And I felt like he felt that way about me. And then, so that was the first thing I think that we connected on. And then the romance part came at our first like date, physical date.
Yeah, when I came down here.
Which I was convinced he wasn't going to show up for, because he was in New Jersey and I'm at a church meeting for the youth ministry, and he's like, yeah, I'm on my way down. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I'm sitting in the church meeting, and he's like, okay, well, he texted me, well, the bus is pulling into Union Station. I'm like, oh shit, he's really here. So I had to drive from Glen Arden to Union Station to pick him up. We had our first date, went to the movies, had dinner, sat there, talked for hours about politics, and he kissed me, and I was done. I was done. I don't know what the movie was. To this day, I can't remember what the movie was.
That's so romantic.
Yeah, I mean, so it was like, that wasn't like, for me, that was like the solidification of like, look, this is the guy. Whatever else comes with it, this is the guy. So work it out.
The day of the fat man is near.
Yeah. So I think for me,
I'm trying to be serious and enjoy the love story.
And I mean, but I think this is what makes him. I mean, still, he's my best friend. He's my best friend. I know he has my back. I have his. And that comes from just knowing who he is as a person, and I like him. But that's also, I think, comes from our ideology. I mean, this is community. You don't abandon community. You fight for your community. You fight for your people. So
we both got maced together. I mean,
come on. If the kids didn't do it,
trial by fire, literally.
We got maced. I don't know. There's some footage that what was it? Who has it? But anyway.
Yeah, I think it's on the Sputnik
Facebook page. And we were down there with Black Lives Matter last year, and so we were involved in all of that, Jackie and I, trying to be generals to all of these millennials out there that's fighting. And
that was funny.
so they
good luck with that.
Yeah, we were just trying to be, because we was like, look, y'all are the foot soldiers. Y'all go ahead. We'll give you the strategy.
We're like giving instructions. Right. Okay, don't run. All right, no, go that way. So no, turn your back.
Right. So the cops came, and the one cop, and I'm very protective over her. So what happened was the Capitol Hill police came, and they was getting ready to trample on this guy. And I once once I'm in something, I'm in it. That's just me. And so when I seen that, I ran over there and I picked the guy up, and the cops looking at me because it's like this African tribe that go and just take food from the lions, you know what I mean? And they were just looking at me like that. It was like, what's this guy? You know, picked him up, put him on my shoulder, then took him out. And so then Jackie was there. And then all of a sudden, this little white cop come over there, man, and he just sprayed her in the face. And that just pissed me off.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
I knew I was going to go to jail that day. And he sprayed her in the face and stuff. So when I went to go for him, then all the other cops came and they just maced the hell out of me, man. So Jackie's maced, I'm maced. All I wanted, because I used to smoke cigarettes at the time. So when Jackie was leading me, because I couldn't see. So when we got across the street, I said, Jackie, where's my smokes?
Oh my gosh. You earned it. You earned the smoke that day.
I'm getting maced and I'm cussing the cops out. Fuck you, you pigs.
Right.
I see you. I can't see nothing. I see you. He comes over. What the hell? And they facing him. Fuck you.
Right,
Damn, they facing my... And
Oh
then
my gosh.
he's over in the corner. Girl, where my smokes
Where's
at?
my
Just
smokes?
put my cigarette in my mouth.
Oh my gosh.
But
That's
I
wild.
mean,
It was fun though.
yeah, but I mean, ultimately, I think this also means this whole revolutionary love thing also means for us that because we're in this struggle together, we open up a part of our life to this community. I mean, you know, not like as an example or anything, because I kind of hate the whole relationship advice thing, the whole you know, relationship advice market that's out there. That drives me nuts.
You would never do that.
I just look, you do what you need to do in your relationship to be happy yourself and to be healthy with the person that you're with. That's my relationship advice. That's it. And it's different for everybody. And mostly keep people out of your private business. That
Period.
People, family, friends, there's some stuff you just don't tell. But because we're in this struggle, there is a part of our life that I think is open to our comrades and friends. Like we do open our home up to people who come into town. And you know,
John will stay here.
Yeah, Jamu is convinced.
Right?
The family room is actually a Jamu's bedroom.
Yeah.
And
in fact, when he does come in, my job is, because he loves my spaghetti. I make a mean spaghetti.
Yes.
So he insists that I fix spaghetti when he gets here.
Yes, and Sharice.
Well, you know you can't eat a woman's spaghetti, so
when you come, we have to make the cabbage.
Right.
Jared, you haven't told us what your dish is, so you know. But this is what we see.
Big and vegan.
Salad.
Okay.
We had to deal with
we made vegan stuff for Yane. You know, our dog is Yane's boyfriend, so you know the dog loves Yane. So a part of our life belongs to the struggle, to the community, and I think that's a part of this revolutionary love thing, where you know we're together to provide this space, this part of our relationship to this revolutionary community, to the revolution. You know, and I think that's part of the reason we are together, to be here for our comrades in this way.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is, I think one of the biggest gifts for me in this struggle, outside of the relationship part, is the people that we were allowed to afforded to meet. And I'll give you an example. Now, Jared Ball right here. When I first came to DC, because I was always into, when I lived up in North Jersey, I used to listen to WBAI, right? All the time up there. And so when I came down here, I didn't know that PFW was part of the Pacifica Network, whatever. So I'm
they be trying to diss DC. All these Jersey New Yorkers be trying to diss DC. That's how it is.
Right. So, you know, here I am just getting my first truck driving job down here, trying to settle into DC and everything. And I don't do music, radio. I don't. I either listen, she knows, I listen to talk radio or something where I can learn something. I mean, I've given up on R&B radio a long time ago. So here I am trying to fine tune. I said, damn, all they got is conservative talk down here. So she told me about, well, they got PFW. I said, what the hell is PFW? So she told me where it was. I go to work that day and I'm in the truck and I'm listening to it. And guess what? I mix what I like. So I said, damn, who's this guy? I like this. You know, at first I liked the intro. then when I heard him talking and I heard what the show was like, I was like, yo, I like this, you know. So I look forward to his show all the time, you know. And then I got, you know, and then I look forward to other people's shows and stuff. And so Jared and I took a picture that I had put on it was my cover photo one time because I was just so thrilled to meet him. And so we were where was that event, Jared, that we was at?
I don't even remember. Somewhere.
I think it was at a Paca teaching.
It was at a Paca teaching.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds right. That sounds right.
So when I saw them there, Jackie said to me, "Oh, you know the guy you like on PFW, that's him right there." And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh man, I got to get his picture." So I still got that picture that, you know, and when I just posted it on my page, Jared, you liked it. And I said, "Hey, who knew, huh?" Like I didn't know that I would be sharing the space with him. So yeah, I'm a geek like that, you know. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate. And then Dr. CBS, when I met you, and I was like, damn, this just gets better. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm a little nutty, but you know, I mean well. Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And you know, was he lighter than you imagined?
Well, you know, actually, it was my first time seeing him. And you know, I knew, you know, because you know, but you know, I was, you know, he would talk about his background and stuff on the radio, so you know, I knew he wasn't as dark as me. But
no, that wasn't the first time that we saw him. The first time that we saw him was at the panel discussion after Black Panther.
That's right.
Yeah, and then that was at the whatever theater that was in Silver Spring.
Yeah.
And we
almost had the altercation.
Ajamu was there, and we were like all enthralled, you know, at Ajamu because we.
Ajamu saved. I think he saved me that day.
I think he did.
Yeah, I think
he did.
Because he was the lone voice in the audience that was like, "This movie's whack."
Yeah,
right. And because everybody was like lined up to get me. Look.
Yep.
Yeah, they were all Wakanda'd out, and it was like I thought we were a PFW audience. I was like, ugh.
Right. Yeah, we were like, who is that? And we hadn't met you then, and we're like, who is that light-skinned guy? Oh,
that's him.
Jared Ball. Wow.
Jared Ball. Yeah.
And then when I heard him talk, I was like, yeah, that's him, because I recognize the voice. That's him. Yep. So yeah, this has been like really when we say labor of love, it's been a labor of love, and it's been a beautiful journey too, because of all the people that we've been able to meet and share stuff with, you know. So I mean, and we learned, like I said, I really mean it. I'm just not saying this, man. I really mean it. Like I feel like I only did 1 year in college, and so when I go on y'all streams and I listen to what y'all say, I mean, I feel like I'm going through that all over again, you know. And that's why I have such a respect for Black academia, Black scholarship. I really do, because you know, I'm like, damn. I said, I wish this form existed when I was going to school back in the day. Probably would have to pay all these damn student loans.
Still would be coming after me for these damn fees.
Well, thank you for that. Amazing, thank you. Well, most Black academics are bums, but I'm glad that we are right ones. Period. Like, anyway, Jared, do you have another tweet?
I do. I had one more that I think speaks to actually the politics that bring us all together here. On March 2nd, you all tweeted, quote, "The ruling class are internationalists. They tell you they're insert country first, but borders don't stop their pursuit of profit from capitalist exploitation around the world. They're imperialists who want you confined to borders and nationalism while they rape the world for dollars."
You already know who that is from.
First of all, you know it's me because I'm long-winded. So
that's the people's prophetess, period.
Yep.
I cannot do short tweets. I just don't. My brain doesn't think like that. But I mean, this whole idea, and it's crazy to see. And I understand that this whole Black nativist movement is very small in real life, but you know, like we've established, they're very loud and they're very persistent, and they have this talent showing up all over the place where Black radicals are, but they are not the only ones who are guilty of this isolationist ideology. A lot of white progressives are too. You know, so there is this desire among the American left, whatever it is, to ignore foreign policy and thinking that they can do that, like that's the smart way to get what they want here in this country. But the people they're asking, or they think they're demanding things from, these people are not isolationists. These people are always talking about, oh, you know, borders this and borders that, and we have to strengthen the borders. But they make deals with multinational corporations all over this world that are usually in European nations, because they ain't invading Denmark. You know, if they can't make a deal with Germany, trust me, they're not going to invade Germany. They're not going to piss off Angela Merkel like that. But you let the president of Ghana tell Switzerland, like he's doing right now, we're not giving y'all cocoa again because y'all are ripping us off. And now all of a sudden, there's a problem. Well, these people are making deals across borders, across ethnic ideologies, as long as they're European, across religious ideologies, as long as they're European, across government structures, as long as they're run by Europeans. So if the people who are doing that and not paying any attention to anybody's borders, anybody's DNA, as long as they're European, then what the hell makes us think that we can isolate ourselves from people who are like us in DNA, in lineage, in experience, and get anything from the group of people who are united against us along those very same lines? That just the craziest, most illogical kind of thinking. And I can't even say that I know where that comes from. I understand it's part of, you know, the white supremacist capitalist indoctrination, but it's like some of us have taken it so far that it's like, at this point, it's like, that's on y'all. I can't even blame the white people for that shit. That's on y'all.
Yeah. Well, part of what I write about in my work is the ways in which the granting of civil rights on the one hand, and the ways in which it's connected to the bludgeoning of the left on the other hand. Part of that result is the renationalization of our politics, right? Because part of what is red baited is Black internationalism and Pan-Africanism, third worldism, tricontinentalism. And so there's a particular historical moment, namely like the late 60s, early 70s, where there's this Faustian bargain, as Gerald Horne calls it, where it's like, we'll let a few Blacks into the leadership apparatus. But part of that is that you don't say shit about foreign policy, right? And so, of course, this is notwithstanding like African Liberation Day and the anti-apartheid movement. But by and large, most of our we think only in national terms, right? Not even really in local terms sometimes, but like this very national US-based politics, because that was part of what it meant to be granted particular types of rights and recognition and move away from redistribution in terms of our political demands. And so one might argue that is one result of the sort of the red baiting, the anti-radicalism and anti-communism, and the ways that informs how we understand struggle, right? And so we're slowly reemerging from that and gaining a more internationalist scope, which is also why there's a heightened, state repression again, and a much more sophisticated, much more wide-reaching state repression, because we know it. Like there was the Pan-African Congresses all throughout the 1920s, 1920s. There's the Garvey movement. There's even, the communist movement and the works they were doing to link like Scottsboro to the invasion of Ethiopia to the Spanish Civil War. So the internationalism has been there, but but in terms of thinking about historical development, that's how I understand it. That could be wrong though. I don't know.
Well, we also just in that point there, when it comes to some of those that want to give us a hard time. One of the things about Luke My Nation is we don't back down from nobody. So that's why we wrote. So when they was coming at us, ADOS and all the rest of them, we decided that we was going to express how we felt in our newsletter, and so we did the op-ed on groups like that and what we felt about them, and
what you call them. What'd you call them?
I called them counter nigga insurgencies.
That's
You
what
know
he
what I mean?
called
And the counter nigga insurgent agent. That's what we called them.
Yeah.
And
Handkerchief heads, in other words.
And so we just, when we laid our case, why we called them that, and and so, one of the things is that like you were saying, and we felt the same way. Like we're going, we don't have a problem if that's your ideology, or we don't have a problem with that. But but when when you want to get nasty, and all of us know how to go to niggerhood quick. So it's like, look, if you want to go to niggerhood, we can go to niggerhood too. So so that was our answer. Like, y'all ain't the only one, man, that can pull out the switchblade.
And plus, you got that researcher, crate digger, brother Lamont out there hooking you up too. So you got that background support.
That's my secret weapon right there. That's right.
Period.
And I felt really bad. I just gotta say that I felt really, because when I ride with you, I ride with you. When I like you, I like you. So when this clown got on, who was the clown that got on there and was trying to give Jared a hard time or talking all that shit?
I can't remember.
Well, whoever, he ain't important. But when he was going at, man, I was taking that shit personal, man. I was like,
you can't come at
yeah.
Like, you cannot come at our
period.
I was really taking that shit personally. Like, but I know, I said, nah, Jared.
Abdus was like, find this profile. Find it.
No, we don't play that shit, period. Like, we can roast Jared for being Jared, but like, can't nobody, like, don't do that. Kamal, Kalanji, the Luke Mont. No, we don't play that shit. And the hammer Thor, Black Thor, will come upon your ass if you do that, period. And you don't want that. You don't want no smoke with BPM. I don't think.
Not at all.
Yeah, Luke Mons, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. We love being in conversation with you. We will have you back. In fact, I want to do a long form interview with y'all in 2 shows from now, talking about all of this stuff more in depth. We appreciate you.
We love y'all so much. Thank you so much.
Peace to Lamont.
Peace to Lamont. That's right.
Stop bringing that dude's name up. Him and all his good ass friends from Camden. Jesus.
No, we all need Lamonts.
Yeah, we all need Lamonts. That's right.
We all need Lamonts. Anyway, I appreciate you.
All right, thank you. Y'all too. And thank
all right, you. Peace, y'all.
All right, take care.
So for what I'm on this week, y'all, I'm going to do a little bit something different. I'm not going to talk about Black Scare, Red Scare, but I want to talk about this. Alpheus Hunton Unsung Valiant, 2nd edition. I am so proud of this volume, you guys. So here, let me just run down quickly what happened. Okay, so this is my original copy of Unsung Valiant. This thing is split in half, okay? Because this Dorothy Hunton, when she wrote this biography of her husband, Alpheus Hunton, she self-published it in 1987. And so this is the original binding. And in fact, the book that I have is signed by her. This is interesting. This was Armstead Robinson's copy. Look up Armstead Robinson. So she wrote, "Best wishes to Professor Armstead Robinson, Afro-American Studies and African Studies. Sincerely, Dorothy Hunton, December 7th, 1988. So this is the original printing. And so the binding didn't hold up. And so I've bought 4 copies of that biography at this point. Okay. And so I was like, I had tweeted, I wish somebody would reprint this book, because all of my copies keep splitting down the middle, and I want to be able to, I want to be able to have a whole copy, and I also want to be able to assign this to my students. So Dante from the Claudia Jones School of Political Education was like, all right, I'm gonna link you with international publishers. Schmo, blah, blah. We ended up linking up, and they decided to print this new copy, y'all. And then I wrote the foreword for this new copy of Alpheus Hunton Unsung Valiant. And let me just tell you, Alpheus Hunton is the man. He worked on the Encyclopedia Africana with W.E.B. Du Bois before Du Bois passed away, and after. He was one of the key architects of the Council on African Affairs. He was one of the founders of the National Negro Congress. He wrote a newsletter of the CAA called Spotlight Africa. He was the editor of that. He was just with the shits, period. And prior to while he was doing all this work, initially, he was a professor at Howard University, a professor of English. And then he left that post to work permanently for the Council on African Affairs. And so he is just the consummate, I just love him. I think he's the consummate scholar activist. And I also am obsessed with Dorothy Hunting, number one, because her beauty was like renowned, y'all. Like everybody, when I was in the archives and like Shirley Graham Du Bois papers, W.E.B. Du Bois papers, Doxy Wilkerson's papers, everybody talked about how beautiful she was. Even Gerald Horne was like, yeah, even into her, her older age, she was beautiful. And so let me see if I can find a picture of her in the book. And I don't know why. And also she was a revolutionary in her own right. Here's a picture of them in the USSR. That's him. Look, he's all tall and dapper. I just love me some Alpheus Hunting, but I love her too, because alongside just being, gorgeous and world renowned for her beauty, she was one of the founders of the Sojourners for Truth and Justice. She also did work in the Council on African Affairs. She just was, she struggled alongside Alpheus Hunting. And so just like the Lukmans, there are another revolutionary couple engaged in mutual comradeship. And I just love that. And I feel like this, her biography of him is like a labor of love and a testament to their love. She even says this in her foreword. So I just want to read two things. I just want to read an excerpt from my foreword to this new edition of Alpheus Hunting, Unsung Valiant. And then I want to read one of my favorite parts of the book, man. I just love this part of the book. But okay, let me start with my foreword. And I'm reading it from this document because they made a mistake in this first printing where they have the original foreword by Ronald Walters instead of my new foreword. So, but they're reprinting it. I caught the error early. So I'm just going to read part of what I wrote. I'll just read, the first couple paragraphs. I wrote, on August 8th, 1951, the preeminent Pan-Africanist Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a letter expressing his concern about the arrest of Dr. William Alpheus Hunting Jr. During the height of McCarthyism, Hunting had been in prison for 6 months for refusing to turn over the names of persons who had contributed to the Civil Rights Congress's Bell Fund. According to Du Bois, Hunting was, quote, a quiet, studious, conscientious, and absolutely uncorruptible, end quote, man whose only crime was his commitment to the liberation of African working and oppressed people. Du Bois appealed to prominent Black leaders to petition the United States President and Attorney General to immediately pardon his fine and distinguished comrade. Like Du Bois, Hunting was one of the great Pan-Africanists of the 20th century. Numerous organizations, publications, movements, and struggles benefited from his deep knowledge of the African continent, steadfast commitment to ending colonialism and imperialism, protracted struggle to eradicate Jim Crow and apartheid, excoriation of fascism in its many forms, challenge to colonialism and corporate domination, and vision of a socialist world devoid of the violence and inhumanity wrought by capitalist exploitation. Hunting was courageous, humble, hardworking, and ethical, and never wavered from his commitment to the working and oppressed people of the world, not least those of African descent. His scholarship and praxis thus stand the test of time and remain especially relevant to a world still suffering from many of the forms of exploitation and oppression that he challenged until his dying day. And then I go on to talk about how Dorothy Hunting is largely responsible for preserving his legacy because Alpheus Hunting, Unsung Valiant is actually the first and remains the only full-length treatment of his life. Fun fact, Evelyn Higginbotham was actually, there's some documents that show that she was actually going to write a biography or some sort of monograph about Alpheus Hunting, but that never materialized. Anyway, I could go on and on, but the foreword will be, is going to be in the next printing of this text. But I want to read my favorite part of this biography, y'all. And by the way, we'll drop the link in the show notes of this text. You can buy it. It's $19.99. But let me just read this part. I just love this part, y'all. Okay, I'm just going to read it. All right. For 3 years after his release from prison, Alpheus fought a losing battle with the government in defense of the right to advocate and support the cause of African freedom. Never endowed with a working fund, the nonpartisan nonprofit Council on African Affairs ran solely on contributions and was staffed mostly with volunteer help. Few volunteers were available for the many pressing office tasks, and Alpheus found himself practically a one-man organization, persevering under the most trying conditions and working late into the night without pay. Though he never confided his anguish to me, I knew his heart was overcast with despair while he tried unsuccessfully to disguise his inner feelings. It was infinitely more painful for me to watch him literally drag himself to the office day after day, being stripped of vitality and enthusiasm for life, than to experience it myself. Yet, as I watched his shoulders droop more and more and his steps began to falter, my anxiety for him mounted. Finally, I could stand it no longer. African freedom or no freedom. Okay. African freedom or no African freedom, I screamed. It's senseless to kill yourself from overwork, no matter how important the cause. As we sat on the divan trying to sort out our thoughts and emotions after my sudden outburst, the silence deepened. Alpheus lifted his tired, drained face, and his dark brown eyes, filled with sorrow, sought mine for a fleeting moment, as if in search for an answer to my unexpected flare-up. Slowly, he drew me close and gently kissed my tears away, and in his quiet, soft voice, calmly but firmly promised to stop. At the executive board meeting, June 14th, 1955, to decide whether the council should continue, Alpheus reviewed the organization's work during his 12 years of activity. He stressed the importance of the pioneering character of the work. It had been the only organization of its type in the United States giving full attention to the African people's problems and struggles. He then traced the reason for the rapid growth of American interest in Africa since 1952, which was reflected in popular and scholarly journals and books, in academic and government circles, and in the emergence of new organizations with aims and programs of work similar to those of the council. He spoke of the heightened concern with African and colonial problems on the part of Black organizations with other main interests. But anyway, I just love that part when she was like, hey, bro, like, you're killing yourself. Like, you can't continue to do this. And that just is such a moment of like revolutionary love that I wrote about that somewhere else. But I just really love that part. So anyway, the moral of the story, what I'm on today, right now, is get you a copy of Alpheus Hunton, Unsung Valiant, with a foreword by Sharice Burden-Stelly. Alpheus Hunton is amazing. This biography is amazing. It's so informative. You get deep insight into many radical organizations and movements that were happening between, let us say, the 1920s up until the 1970s. So that's what I'm on. Loving Alpheus Hunton, the Unsung Valiant. And just really happy that this is actually out in the world. All right. So that's what I'm on. Jared, do you have any closing thoughts?
I do. And as usual, it starts with congratulations on another great show. Congratulations on the publication. I do want to say quickly, shout out to the late, great Ron Walters, who I always like to credit, not only gave me my first publication, supported me through my dissertation, which was not well received by everybody in the academy, and was always very honest about the limits of his politics. He was always very clear about his stopping at reform and giving room and respect to those who wanted to be revolutionary. So I always appreciated that about Ron Walters. So I just wanted to quickly say that. I also wanted to say, when you all talked briefly and Phil Donahue was mentioned, I happened to be at one of the early media reform conferences. It's sitting behind Phil Donahue and thinking, because for some of us of a certain generation, Phil was the white man in commercial media. He talked to all the people nobody wanted to talk to. And when he got fired from MSNBC, despite having the most popular show at the time, and was sitting in the row in front of me at a media reform conference, I remember thinking, I did have one of those moments where I was thinking, damn, I mean, if Phil is in the media reform conference without a job, what the hell is everybody else expecting to have happen here at a media reform conference? But anyway, so I was like, David, Phil.
Yeah.
But then lastly, again, such a strong conversation with Dr. Strong, puns intended, I guess, in that. The Get Out the Vote bus reference to and the Sharptonist approach to ambulance chasing, as she described it, reminded me of what Dr. John Henrik Clarke, the late great Dr. Clarke, said of Sharpton, saying he is an ambulance chaser. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was very deep. And then also just a reminder that we used to talk about all the time what we called the Great Negro Bowls, hosted by Wells Fargo and Tavis Smiley. That when he had his stage, his bigger stage, I think showed the limits of the range of thought in those discussions and having lasting impact, as Dr. Strong pointed out. So anyway, great job again. I just wanted to throw those three thoughts in there real quick. But again, congratulations. Great job.
Thank you. And so I do want to mention that Ron Walters, his piece will still be in there as the preface, or one of them. Mine is the foreword, his is the preface, something like that. So it still will be in there.
Right on.
All right. So in order to recap, we started out shooting the shit about Samaria Rice and her calling out the Grammy performance and, folks using Black Death for clout. We roasted Sean King and mentioned the sort of contradiction of Rebecca Wilcox having this meeting with the moms when she had some less than supportive things to say about Black men and no comments about Tamir Rice or any of these cases previously. We had an interview with my girl, Dr. Crystal Strong, about her organizing work, being a scholar activist, and her own encounter with the grifters and the less than reputable elements of the movement. We then chopped it up with the Lukmans, Jackie and Baba Lukman, going through their timeline, learning about their revolutionary love, and so much more. And then finally, for What I'm On, I talked about my excitement that Alpheus Hunt and the Unsung Valiant, the second edition, is now out in the world, and encouraging all y'all to go cop you a copy. So that's our show for this Friday evening. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. CBS. That is Jared Ball, and we are signing off.